In the beginning, all was one, a blank canvas, until a catastrophic event in the form of a grand rupture formed the cosmos into being, creating all manners of life. Morality, heat, cold, life, and death. We find ourselves in a world of this creation, the lands between. A unique world with properties that support the existence of life, and an Elden Ring that controls the logic and laws of the world. We exist a long time in the future, where countless ages have passed, and the existing age has crumbled into a kingdom whose prime has long passed, and one that has been abandoned by its creator, the Greater Will. Like a higher power, the Greater Will is introduced to us in a way that makes it seem like a being or power that controlled the lands between. Considering it is said to have abandoned the demigods following the Shattering War, it leads us to believe that the Greater Will has cognition and sentience, and is completely able to remove its influence to the point where it can choose when and where it wishes to place its focus. The Greater Will is understood to be the greatest influence on the world, meaning its name is quite accurate. But the questions only start here. What is the Greater Will? Where did the Greater Will come from, and where did it go? As we progress on our path to becoming the Elden Lord, we are introduced to a living representative of the Greater Will, along with multiple deceased ones, those of course being the two fingers. We come to learn about how they communicate with both the finger readers and with the Greater Will through their wiggling. It appears that they display an arcane cipher that is either traced by their finger readers, like a form of sign language, or the cipher itself appears visible in the air to the finger readers. We see examples of this cipher in the Coded Sword and the Cipher Pada, which describe themselves as formless, with the Cipher Pada specifically telling us that the furtive inscription appears to hang in the air, the language of light spoken by the two fingers. Furthermore, the Coded Sword tells us that it is given to the Tarnished of the Round Table by the two fingers. Yet something about the fingers seems off. And by speaking with Vare following our introduction to the fingers, he says this.
Ah, there you are. You claimed a great rune and had your audience with the two fingers at the Round Table home. What was your impression? Aha, your intuition serves you well. My doubts had been piling up, you see. The words of the two fingers cannot be trusted. Truly, naught but rambling, senile delusions. I believe that when the Elden Ring was shattered, the two fingers were corrupted, their guidance skewed. Even worse, the fingers harbor no love for our kind. That's the part that irks the most.
And thus, our doubts and our search for the truth begin. As expected, the search is not straightforward, as information about the Greater Will is extremely limited, and its influence is said to no longer be present in the lands between. Based on the state of the world, it seems like that's true. So to learn more, we need to explore other avenues. Early in our journey, we come across a young woman, Irina, who has fled Castle Morn upon its invasion by the Misbegotten. After clearing Castle Morn of its intruders, we return to see that at least one of these Misbegotten has found its way out of our assault and has discovered Irina, leaving nothing but its cleaver and the deceased body of its victim behind. This is not the last time we will see her though, as later, in an unexpected encounter, we find a woman who looks surprisingly similar. Actually, not similar. It is Irina, but now she refers to herself as Hayeta.
Hello? Is someone there? My name is Hayeta, and I'm journeying in search of the distant light. If I might be so bold as to ask, would you donate any Shabriri grapes in your possession to me? My eyesight has been weak since birth, you see. I can't tell which way I'm supposed to go next, but when I eat one of those grapes, I can feel a distant light in the back of my eyes. It will lead me to my true duty as a finger maiden
It happens that we just found one on a body below Godric's throne room, and by this point, we have been called maidenless quite a bit, so when Hayeta says she wishes to become a finger maiden, we feel inclined to help, handing over our newly found grapes, unaware of the coming events.
Oh, many thanks to you. Now I can feel the distant light once more. You are most kind indeed. May the blessing of the fingers be upon you.
We gave Hayeta our grape, beginning our path of enlightenment. I'm not sure what I want to call it, but we do learn a lot of crucial information about the Greater Will from Hayeta and the Path of Chaos, so we press on. Each encounter with Hayeta gets stranger and a little bit darker. If we investigate the grapes we have been giving Hayeta, we realize that these grapes are actually the burned out eyes of those touched by chaos. But at this point, we don't really know why or how this is happening. As we visit some of the settlements afflicted with madness, we can get a bit of a better idea. Shabriri's howl tells us that madness is a sickness caused by the flame of frenzy that first infected a reviled man named Shabriri. And Shabriri's woe tells us that Shabriri had his eyes gouged out as a punishment, and eventually the flame of frenzy filled his empty sockets. This is likely why those afflicted with madness are referred to as Shabriri grapes. This description also tells us where the incantation originates from, the burned fingers that Hayeta described. But to our surprise, they are referred to as the 3 fingers, not the 2 fingers as we may have expected. Upon our arrival in Leyndell and our defeat of Morgoth, we find ourselves spurned by the Erdtree, kept out by impenetrable thorns. Returning to the throne room, we speak with Melina, who suggests we travel to the Forbidden Lands and the mountaintops of the Giants in search of the Flame of Ruin, so we may burn the thorns away. With our 2 fingers at a loss for direction, we make the decision to travel once more with Melina. Upon arriving at the Zama ruins, we find another familiar face. This time, we find Yura, the dragon slayer we met in Limgrave. Upon speaking with him though, we find that he is not the same man we knew. He has met the same fate as Irina, and is now inhabited by another man, Shabriri. Yeah, that Shabriri. He informs us of what actions we're about to take, that Melina will need to act as a sacrifice if we wish to light the Flame of Ruin, but we can find another way if we wish to stop that from happening.
You are about to sacrifice something precious, the life of a fair maiden, that you would toss into the fiery forge, only so that you may be lord. What a horrible thing to ponder. Your ascendancy requires her sacrifice, whether she wishes it or not. But how would the lord, crowned so, be looked upon, chosen, tarnished, and would be lord? Dare to tread the path of true rigor, spare the poor girl, and singe your own flesh in her stead. If you are prepared to show resolve and attain lordship through righteous hardship, then heed the words of I, Shabriri.
If we decide to look for an alternative, he tells us that we should turn back and travel to the depths below Leyndell to find the 3 fingers, inherit the frenzied flame, so we can burn the Erdtree ourselves, saving Melina. If we decide to follow Shabriri's guidance, we will find ourselves at the frenzied flame prescription. To our surprise, Hayeta has also found her way here. She instructs us on how to be granted audience with the 3 fingers. Assuming we do so, Hayeta will be waiting for us outside and requests that we rest our hand on her and burn her to make her our maiden. In doing so, we grant her the words of the 3 fingers. And fortunately for us, she shares these details with us.
I have touched them. The words of the 3 fingers. As your maiden, allow me to divine them. All that there is came from the one great. Then came fractures, and births, and souls. Where the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse. everyone born of the mistake. And so, what was borrowed must be returned, melted all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again.
While it took us some time to get here, we finally learned more about the Greater Will. It was a being in the time before the cosmos truly existed, and is claimed to be the reason why the cosmos does exist. The Frenzied Flame speaks of the One Great, what can only be interpreted as the original existence, and seems to want to return to this state, which is where the Lord of Chaos comes in. If we inherit the Frenzied Flame, our task is to burn the world to the ground with it. Yet, we are meant to question why this would be a good outcome. As we approach the Three Fingers, Melina meets with us and says,
If you intend to claim the Frenzied Flame, I ask that you cease. It is not to be meddled with. It is chaos, devouring life and thought unending. However ruined this world has become, however mired in torment and despair, life endures. Births continue. There is beauty in that. Is there not? If you would become Lord, do not deny this notion. Please, leave the Frenzied Flame alone.
If we decide to proceed further, we will find ourselves with Hyetta at the Frenzied Flame prescription. Melina pleads again with us to leave the Frenzied Flame alone. If by this point we have visited the Abyssal Woods in the Land of Shadow, we will also learn about the impact of the Frenzied Flame. By reading the Surging Frenzied Flame item description, it states, "Spirits are eternal, and yet Frenzied Flame melts them away regardless. No wonder the Hornsent forbid the flame's use." The Frenzied Flame does not only burn away life, but it burns away the spirits and anything that the Greater Will originally created. To further solidify the true existence of the Greater Will, Count Ymir explains that the cosmos was once empty, until a great rupture in the sky brought everything into being, and that everything that exists now once originated from that rupture. This rupture seems to be the same that Hyetta calls a fracture, the one that caused the deconstruction of this One Great. That brings us to the Lands Between. This world is governed by the Greater Will's vassals, those being Metyr, who we will talk a little bit more about later, and the Elden Beast. As far as we know, the only one of those two that was able to actually receive communication from the Greater Will was Metyr, who communicated through the microcosm carried in her tail. The word microcosm means a community, place, or situation regarded as encapsulating in miniature the characteristic qualities or features of something much larger, meaning that Metyr's microcosm is a small representation of something else much greater. I believe that this microcosm is a representation of the Greater Will itself, as a being that created the cosmos. The Greater Will, being the creator of the cosmos itself, makes sense when we consider the fact that both Metyr and the Elden Beast arrived to the Lands Between in the form of stars, with Metyr specifically referred to as a daughter of the Greater Will. The Elden Beast, however, is never referenced as a descendant of the Greater Will, only ever being referred to as a beast or a vassal. More specifically, it's called the Incarnation of Order in the Elden Remembrance description. While Metyr acts as the link between the Lands Between and the Greater Will, the Elden Beast acts as an overseer. Taking the form of the Elden Ring, the Elden Beast maintains the laws of the world on behalf of the Greater Will. The Elden Ring itself is like a code or a physical representation of the rules of the world, controlling how everything operates, which again makes sense why the Elden Beast is referred to as the Incarnation of Order. So with that, we know a little bit more about the Greater Will and its origins, but what does that mean for the cosmos and the Lands Between? To understand that, we need to understand another concept, the primeval current. Starting with two of the individuals who looked into it, those being Master Azure and Master Lusat. Comet Azure tells us when Azure glimpsed into the primeval current, he saw darkness. He was left both bewitched and fearful of the abyss. We then learn from the Stars of Ruin that when Lusat glimpsed into the primeval current, he beheld the final moments of a great star cluster, and upon seeing it, he too was broken. It seems that trying to understand the primeval current breaks people's minds. Usually this idea is used to portray a being or idea as beyond comprehension, similar to the effects of the Great Ones of Bloodborne. When we defeat Count Ymir and look at the description of his High Priest hat, it says the circular design at the top represents the Greater Will and its lightless abyss. Depending on how you interpret these words, it could mean one of two things. We know from Azure that the primeval current is a dark abyss. The lightless abyss referred to in Ymir's hat could be something that belongs to the Greater Will in an item ownership sense, as in the Greater Will created and controls the primeval current. However, I interpret it in another way. I believe that Ymir sees the Greater Will and the Abyss as one in the same. We know that the primeval current is also known as a dark abyss, but does that mean the Greater Will is the primeval current? I don't believe so, but we'll discuss that a little bit later. For now, the primeval current seems to be similar to the Crucible. The Hornsent described the Crucible as a form of energy that presents itself as spiral currents. I believe that the primeval current is also a form of energy, which is why they're both referred to as currents. Azure was left bewitched and fearful of the abyss. Lusat left broken by it. Yet, Ymir does not share similarities with Lusat or Azure, both in their state of being or in their mental state. While Ymir may be a little bit nuts, he isn't broken, nor is he afflicted with glintstone. If Ymir is aware of the abyss, but did not glimpse it like Azure or Lusat, how did he come to learn of it? Well, that's likely through Metyr, and Metyr's microcosm, which, as I speculated earlier, may be a representation of the Greater Will. This distinction will be important later when we discuss the origins of the primeval current and what its existence means for the cosmos and the lands between, but we'll get to that shortly. The primeval current seems to be an energy. It also seems to be responsible for the existence of glintstone in the lands between. The founding rain of stars is thought to be the founding glintstone sorcery. The glimpse of the primeval current that the astrologer saw became real, and the stars' amber rained down on this land. While we never learn who this astrologer was, it's clear that the presence of glintstone is a product of the primeval current. This is important because Selen tells us that
our art draws upon the powers embedded in glintstone. But what is the nature of such power? Glintstone is the amber of the cosmos. Golden amber contains the remnants of ancient life and houses its vitality, while glintstone contains residual life, and thus the vitality of the stars. It should not be forgotten that glintstone sorcery is the study of the stars and the life therein, a fact lost on most sorcerers these days.
something interesting is that the shard spiral sorcery takes the form of a spiral, and its description tells us that it is a sorcery of the Keralos Conspectus, the most venerable of the Academy. This was the product of a failed attempt to create a new comet. Considering what Selen teaches us, it's interesting that a failed glintstone sorcery would create a spiral. Perhaps this is because the life within the stars is also of the Crucible, which is why it forms a spiral crucible current when it's not oriented properly. The fact that glintstone is essentially the life that exists within fragments of stars that have fallen on the lands between begs the question, what's destroying these stars? Based on Lusat's vision, I think it's a primeval current itself that's causing this destruction. By understanding what primeval means, we can understand more about why this would be happening. Primeval means of or resembling the earliest ages in the history of the world. If we take this literally, the primeval currents are, or at least resemble, the oldest or original currents and energies of the cosmos. Could it be that the primeval currents are also the very same that existed in the time of the One Great that Hayata tells us about? Well, when we're summoned back to the lands between, the Greater Will is nowhere to be found. Enya leads us to believe that the Greater Will still exists, telling us that it is happy once we claim 2 great runes. And when the Erdtree spurns us, our fingers are confused in an attempt to commune with the Greater Will, with Enya telling us that it may be decades until we hear back. Regardless, we go on ahead with Melina's plan, making the trek to burn and gain entrance to the Erdtree. Though on our path, we may find 2 halves of the Erdtree medallion, and by searching the consecrated snowfields, we can find ourselves on a cliff overlooking Mogwin Mausoleum. After exploring these ruins and defeating Mog, we come across Leda, a knight of Mikola who beckons us.
Come now, touch the withered arm and travel to the realm of shadow.
If we do, we will eventually find ourselves inside a cathedral, meeting a man named Ymir who begins telling us more about the Greater Will and the origins of the world. By this point, we're familiar with Marika and the Two Fingers, so when he says,
I fear that you have borne witness to the whole of it. The conceits, the hypocrisy of the world built upon the Erdtree. The follies of men. Their bitter suffering. Is there no hope for redemption? The answer, sadly, is clear. There never was any hope. They were each of them defective. Unhinged from the start. Marika herself. And the fingers that guided her. And this is what troubles me. No matter our efforts, if the roots are rotten, then we have little recourse.
It catches our attention. What does he mean the fingers are defective? Was Vare right? To know for sure, we need to gain further information. So we travel to the Second Finger ruins and then return to Ymir, where he gives us further clarification on what he meant.
Do you recall what I said? That Marika and the fingers that guided her were unsound from the start? Well, the truth lies deeper still. It is their mother who is damaged and unhinged. The fingers are but unripe children, victims in their own right.
At this point, it's still unclear who the mother is that he's referring to. He says they're broken from the start, but how did that happen? Ymir gives us one final map. It leads us below the cathedral, where we find an answer to our question of who the mother is. We find Metyr, Mother of Fingers, and upon her defeat, we receive her remembrance, which says, Remembrance of Metyr, the Mother of Fingers. The mother of all Two Fingers and Finger Creepers was in turn a magnificently gleaming daughter of the Greater Will, and the first shooting star that fell upon the lands between. Now we know who the mother is, but why was she damaged? During our fight, Metyr uses her tail to call upon a variety of spells, and upon Metyr's defeat, the catalyst that once produced the sorceries collapses. If we look at the description of Metyr's tail fingers, we learn that Metyr received signs from the Greater Will from beyond the microcosm. Despite being broken and abandoned, she kept waiting for another message to come. Well, that explains what Ymir meant. Metyr was damaged because she could no longer communicate with the Greater Will. That explains why the Two Fingers seem disoriented, as Vare says, and why they don't have the answers to the Erdtree locking us out. So how long has Metyr's communication been broken? Ymir says it was broken from the start. But I think it's safe to assume that that isn't literal. The Staff of the Great Beyond specifically states that Metyr received messages and then they stopped, meaning that Metyr wasn't broken from the very start. Rather, in this case, it's likely Ymir means from the start of Marika's rise to godhood. This means that the Two Fingers that guided Marika, and in turn the Two Fingers that guide us, are also broken, as Ymir says. It's possible that we're operating on ancient communications between Metyr and the Greater Will, since it's been so long since Metyr received her last sign. However, even though Ymir says Metyr is broken, I'd like to argue that it's not Metyr. That I don't think Metyr is the problem, rather the Greater Will is the one that's broken. Which may sound confusing, considering the Greater Will is a god and the creator of the cosmos, but there are a few clues that lead me to believe that the Greater Will may have been destroyed, or at least disconnected from the cosmos in some way. For this line of thought, I want to focus on 2 key points about Metyr. One being that Metyr is clearly alive and well. Yes, she has been abandoned, but she does not seem to have any limitation in terms of movement, magic, or her ability to birth fingers. If she isn't physically broken, she could be mentally broken, which I believe is true. She likely is, but I don't think this is the reason for her abandonment. The second point is that her microcosm seems to be working perfectly fine. In phase 2 of her fight, she summons it, and it quickly displays its power, with incredibly strong gravity magic, and its ability to summon smaller copies of a microcosm. And of course, upon Metyr's defeat, the microcosm collapses, showing that it was still functional during her fight. Let's revisit what a microcosm is. A community, place, or situation regarded as encapsulating in miniature the characteristic qualities or features of something much larger. To put it simply, it's a smaller replica or representation of something much greater. Looking at both the fleeting microcosm and the microcosm in Metyr's tale, they're different, and quite different actually. Not only in their power and capability, but in their appearance. The fleeting microcosm sorcery is taught by Count Ymir, but considering Metyr uses it in her fight with us, I think it's safe to assume that Ymir learned it from Metyr. This is further reinforced by many of Ymir's sorceries being referred to as finger sorceries, while all of his others are Carian. But if the fleeting microcosm was created by Metyr, why would it be so different from her own microcosm? The answer lies in the description. The broken and discarded are fully willing to cling to a fleeting simulacra, earning them some modicum of sympathy. The choice of words is interesting. The sorcery is called a fleeting microcosm, and the description further solidifies that this is a recreation of something else by referring to it as a simulacra, saying that the broken and discarded cling to it, which is likely referring to Metyr. We know that Metyr's microcosm is in itself a representation of something greater, but then the fleeting microcosm would be the same, a representation of something greater. But are they actually the same, or do they represent different things? I think that at one point they were identical, but Metyr's microcosm has since changed. Let me explain. I believe that the microcosm held in Metyr's tale is not a static representation of something. Instead, it is a real-time display of the Greater Will, which was a way for Metyr to receive signs from the Greater Will, something akin to a portal. The state that we find Metyr's microcosm in is a clue to what the fleeting microcosm actually is. I believe that is a physical memory of what Metyr's microcosm looked like at some point in the past, and in turn, what the Greater Will used to look like. This is likely why Ymir sees the Greater Will as the circular abyss described in the High Priest hat. He's clearly aware of the fleeting microcosm incantation, and likely gained his insight about the Greater Will through this knowledge. The reason I believe the fleeting microcosm is a past form of Metyr's microcosm is because of what we see inside. A starry expanse, with an abyss in the center. This differs from what we see in Metyr's microcosm, which is just a purple and green hue of emptiness, but they both share the distinct golden outline and one other crucial detail. They both have a black pit in the center, reminiscent of a black hole. It just seems as though the abyss in Metyr's microcosm has expanded and absorbed the stars that we see in the fleeting microcosm. Following Metyr's death, her microcosm explodes with an incredible amount of energy before collapsing in on itself. By paying close attention to the timing of this, it's clear that Metyr's death and the breaking of the microcosm are simultaneous, meaning that Metyr was holding the microcosm together. Through the fight, we see the microcosm grow and shrink, and when it grows, the ring that encapsulates it is broken until it shrinks again and is sealed. I think this is an important detail, that each time the microcosm's ring is broken, it results in powerful gravity magic, with the most significant attack being the pulsar style attack. If you're unaware of what a pulsar is, it's an incredibly dense collapsed star that spins and fires out beams of electromagnetic radiation, closely resembling what we see in Metyr's boss fight. This leads us to believe that not only do the microcosms look like they have black holes within them, but they also act like they have black holes within them, by harnessing and unleashing powerful gravity magic. This power is being held back by Metyr, which is why it only explodes when the ring is broken, and of course when she dies. it seems that this power is not coming from Metyr, rather it's coming from beyond the microcosm. Pulsars are, in simple terms, a dead star. As they collapse, they radiate incredible energy that shoots out in a beam, which sounds a lot like what Lusat saw when he glimpsed the primeval current. Remember, he beheld the final moments of a great star cluster, and upon seeing it, he too was broken. As I speculated earlier, the primeval current could be the original energies of the One Great, and that the One Great is simply just an abyss with all of the energy and life melded together. With the microcosm representing the greater will, it's possible that what Lusat saw was the death of the greater will, as it and the surrounding stars collapsed into the black abyss that we see in Metyr's microcosm now. Azur's vision seems to confirm this by saying, when Azur glimpsed into the primeval current, he saw darkness. He was left both bewitched and fearful of the abyss. This could be the aftermath of Lusat's vision. Lusat saw the great star cluster destroyed, and Azur witnessed the nothingness that was left behind. If the microcosm is indeed a live representation of the greater will, then Metyr would have also watched the same collapse happen, and may have tried to create another microcosm that held in it a fleeting, static view of the last moments of the greater will. As we know, glintstone sorceries were created from the life and the remnants of stars and the life that existed within them, starting with the founding reign of stars. Thought to be the founding glintstone sorcery, the glimpse of the primeval current that the astrologer saw became real, and the star's amber rained down on this land. I speculate that what is seen in the primeval current are not prophecies, but real events, which makes Lusat and Azur's visions much more ominous. At this point, the greater will seems to have been enveloped in the abyss that is the primeval current, leaving its universe and people abandoned. As we watch the final remnants of the greater will and Metyr's microcosm dissipate, it sets in that we may have just witnessed the fate of the world, destined to collapse and join the ever-expanding abyss. The fleeting microcosm gives us insight into the expansion of the void, and how it destroys all that it comes in contact with, swallowing the stars that once filled its expanse. In understanding this, we begin to see the signs that the end is coming. Selen told us before about the nature of the stars and glintstone, that the life of the stars and the cosmos itself were falling upon the lands between, that this amber is the remains of ancient life, and throughout the lands between we can find living beings created from the primeval current's destruction, in the form of falling star beasts and malformed stars. If we meet Ranni along our journey, and see the virtue in her path, we will eventually come face to face with a beast of ill omen, one that fell from the abyss, bringing ruin to an eternal city. Below the city of Noxtella, we find Estelle, natural born of the void, formed in the void by the amalgamation of star debris, as told to us by the bastard star's description. Estelle is considered a malformed star born in the flightless void far away, once destroyed an eternal city and took away their sky, a falling star of ill omen. I had always assumed that Estelle had been sent down by the Greater Will in retaliation to the Nox when they were banished underground, but with this new context, it seems as though Estelle, the falling star beasts, and the other malformed stars could actually be a result of the abyss expanding, destroying stars and cosmic life, leaving these beasts to form from the remnants. They're an ill omen because they signify the coming end of the world. The cosmos is collapsing back into itself, destroying stars and life in the process, slowly returning everything to the One Great. Of all the signs of the end, there is one that stands out the most. With the abyss expanding and destroying the cosmos, closing in on the lands between, there is one being who has been wishing for this since the beginning, a being we may even side with if we wish, the chaotic, frenzied flame. Hayata tells us about the One Great that existed before the Greater Will created the cosmos with the Great Rupture, and how the frenzied flame wished to return back to this state. We met Shabriri earlier, but we never attacked him. However, if we do, he says this upon death.
Shabriri is chaos incarnate. cannot die. May chaos take the world.
Unlike the Lords of Frenzied Flame, Shabriri is not a host or lord. He is an agent of chaos, with his only purpose being to ensure someone eventually burns the world to the ground in the flame of chaos. Depending on your choice, this lord could be you. But why? It's said that Shabriri was the most reviled man in history. But is that the sole reason why he wants to ruin the world? I don't think so. I think it's because, as he says, he is chaos incarnate. But what is chaos and why is it represented by a flame? I don't think it's coincidence that the Flame of Frenzy holds a deep abyss within its flame, resembling the same black hole that may have swallowed the greater will. I believe the Frenzied Flame is the cause of the spread of the abyss. In an attempt to return the cosmos back to the One Great, it destroys all life as it goes, eventually burning everything away. In science, there's a concept called entropy. Entropy, in short, is the level of disorder or chaos within a given system. Elden Ring may be drawing a very cool parallel to the theorized end of our own universe. Scientists hypothesize that the end of our universe will come in the form of a heat death, where our universe will reach a state of equilibrium where no free energy exists to be used, and therefore all life will be extinguished. Without getting too far into the weeds on it, because truthfully, I'm not an expert myself, the idea is that heat is energy, and eventually the heat of the universe will expand into every area, leaving it in a constant state, where energy is no longer transferred and everything is melted away. Does that sound familiar to you? The Frenzied Flame is the chaos that dissolves every world, star, and being that it touches, while the Greater Will was the order that created the world and set its rules in place. Both are representations of the cosmos in different states. The Greater Will separated the One Great to create the life that flourishes in the cosmos, representing the cosmos in a state of expansion. Now, we're seeing the Frenzied Flame succeeding in returning the world to the One Great, melting everything back together in a state of regression. It's funny that Dark Souls showed us the cycles of fire and dark, and how important it is that the cycles end when they're due, and now we may be faced with a similar question. You have to decide yourself if now is the right time for this cycle to end, or does the Lands Between still have some time left? Do you agree with Melina when she says,
However ruined this world has become, however mired in torment and despair, life endures. Births continue. There is beauty in that. Is there not?
will you be the one to melt it all away, or will you decide to leave it for the next Lord of Frenzied Flame? This is by far my most ambitious video to date. It took weeks of preparation, and truthfully, the farther I dug into the theory, the more connections I've pulled out. It's incredible to see how thoughtful the design of the story is, and how every person can draw their own different conclusions in the end. Something I was debating when writing this script is how Metyr and the Fingers are choosing Empyreans without the Greater Will. What criteria are they using? Specifically, when it came to Marika, why was she chosen? It's something I'm still considering, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. If you've stuck with me all the way through to the end of this video, I want to give a sincere thank you. In upcoming videos, I wanted to take a step back and talk more about the general story design of different games, including other Souls games, and how this design has evolved over the years. I will have one more Elden Ring theory coming out, specifically about the Crucible, that was originally supposed to be part of this video, but didn't fit within the whole idea overall, so I wanted to make it its own thing. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this video, and I'll see you in the next one.